Judge Patrick Haggard in Georgia has given Laken Riley's killer a life sentence. Watch this.
Has given you all the evidence you need alone to find this man guilty of every single count in this indictment.
Venezuelan immigrant Jose Ibarra will spend the rest of his life in prison after a judge found him guilty of murdering nursing student Laken Riley. Her death near the University of Georgia campus shocked the community and the nation. We're going to be taking a look at what the attorneys and judge had to say about the defendant and what Laken's family had to say about her life and her legacy. In February of this year, 22-year-old nursing student Laken Riley was out for a run. This was around 9 a.m. near the intramural fields at the University of Georgia. And that is when she was brutally attacked.
The case of Laken Riley was a pivotal case in the 2024 presidential election. There were even confrontations of Joe Biden in press conferences where they were asking him, say her name, say her name. The reason why is it was an illegal immigrant that committed the crime. And the argument is that Laken Riley would still be here if it wasn't for the policies of the Biden-Harris administration, who left the border wide open.
She had tried to call 911, but when the dispatcher picked up, there was just silence. According to data from her smartwatch, Laken put up a fight for nearly 20 minutes before the watch stopped registering a heartbeat. A medical examiner testified that Laken's skull was fractured and that she was asphyxiated. So a combination of blunt force trauma and asphyxiation. Increasingly frantic calls and text messages from Laken's mom and roommates, they went unanswered. Her roommates searched the area near where her phone last pinged, but they couldn't find her. And around 1 p.m., hours after her death, Laken's body was spotted more than 60 feet off the trail in a wooded area. Her top had been pushed up to expose her breasts. Her pants were partially pulled down. Police believe that Laken's attacker intended to rape her, but when she fiercely and bravely fought back, he killed her instead. As multiple agencies launched an investigation, it was an Athens Clark County police officer who found a jacket in a dumpster that may have changed everything, because that jacket was stained with blood and had hair tangled up in the buttons. Officers pulled surveillance footage to see who might have dropped this jacket out. And what do they find? They find Jose Antonio Ibarra, a 26-year-old Venezuelan immigrant who had entered the United States illegally.
I got to tell you that alone is, if his hair is tangled up in a coat that had her buttons on it, and he's the one that's dumping it in there, that would be enough to convince me beyond a reasonable doubt.
Police tracked him down. He had scratches on his arms, his wrists,
that would
his
be
neck.
enough.
He was eventually arrested and faced multiple charges, including felony murder, malice murder, kidnapping with bodily injury, aggravated assault with intent to rape, aggravated battery, hindering a 911 phone call, and also tampering with evidence. He also faced a peeping Tom charge that was connected to him looking into windows of a campus apartment on the same day Laken was killed. Now, Ibarra went to trial, but he opted to have a bench trial where it's up to the judge to decide whether he's guilty or not guilty, rather than a jury. Defense counsel's probably sometimes concerned that a jury will decide a case based on emotion or politics or pressure rather than the facts and the law. But to go to a judge, the idea would be a judge would provide a more sober analysis.
Judge Haggard is a Republican. If he was a Democrat, I might have gone to the judge. As a Republican, I don't know that I would. Not that I don't or do trust judges in one way or the other, but it depends on the reputation of the judge. This is the type of case where it's really important to know the history and reputation of the judge's rulings, because has this judge found people not guilty in this type of situation? Has their punishment been more lenient, or have they had juries in this county that tend to be more likely to convict than other counties? It just depends. If it was a liberal county, it would depend more on the reputation and risks of the judge. But in this situation, hard to say. And the question really would be, were they going for capital punishment? Because if they have capital punishment, meaning the death penalty, then the win in the case would be avoid the death penalty for the defense attorney. Life sentence rather than a death sentence if it qualified, that would be a win for the defense attorney. The possibility of a not guilty with a jury, though, it's hard to say which way you would go. But the logic would be, do you think that the jury is likely to give a death penalty? And you only need one person as a holdout on that jury, at least in Texas if it was, but this is Georgia. So that defense attorney is trying to save the guilty man's life, or prove or prevent the prosecution from proving beyond a reasonable doubt each element of the crime. And so if they can somehow reveal a reasonable doubt, then the jury should vote not guilty. Interesting that they went to a judge rather than a jury in this one. I would be very interested to see what the defense attorney's logic was on that.
Now, the state presented days of evidence and testimony, calling dozens of witnesses, entering hundreds of items into evidence. The defense just called 2 witnesses as they tried to raise reasonable doubt about who might have actually been the culprit. You see, Ibarra lived with several people in an apartment, and one of those people was his brother, Diego Ibarra. Looks kind of similar to him. And that's who the defense seemed to point to as the actual killer. Would make sense, maybe similar appearance, similar DNA. You get the idea. We'll get to the DNA.
Turned on his own brother?
But one of the 2 witnesses the defense called was a man who saw another man in black along the running trail that day. He believed that that person was taller than Jose Ibarra. Could it be Diego? Also, his description of events seemed to be a way to throw off the prosecution's timeline of the killing. The other witness was a neighbor who said that Diego had threatened to kill her. There was even plans by the defense for Diego himself to testify, but at the last minute decided not to because of his own legal troubles. You see, he pleaded guilty over the summer to having a fake green card, which he showed police when they questioned him about Laken's murder. And by the way, they ruled him out as a suspect. Now, on Wednesday, the special prosecutor assigned to the state, Sheila Ross, and one of Ibarra's defense attorneys, Caitlin Beck, summed up their cases for Judge H. Patrick Haggard.
Your Honor, Laken Riley herself has given you all the evidence you need alone to find this man guilty of every single count in this indictment. And as I said in my opening, and what the evidence has shown in this case, is that she did fight.
And it is a direct result of that fight that gives you all the physical evidence you need to convict him. And if you only had that physical evidence, you would have enough to convict him. But what you have heard in the last few days in this trial is video evidence laid on top of the physical evidence that corroborates it. Digital evidence laid on top of the physical evidence and the video evidence that all corroborate one another. And the 3 forms of that evidence in this case, the physical evidence, the video evidence, and the digital evidence, combined twist this very powerful knot that this defendant cannot get out of. There is no way out for him. The evidence in this case has been overwhelming. And the evidence in this case has spoken loud and clear that he is Laken Riley's killer, and that he killed her because she would not let him rape her. So in order to find this defendant not guilty of killing Laken Riley, you would have to disbelieve DNA. You would have to disbelieve fingerprint evidence. And even if you did that, you would still have this. Quite frankly, she got him. She scratched him. And you heard the testimony from Sergeant Epps and from Corporal Sayan. The left wrist was still oozing. Both of them saw that. And when asked, what's with these injuries, by Corporal Sayan, and we played that part of the body cam video for the court to see, Corporal Sayan wasn't coming at him hot. It was super calm and casual. They're out there laughing. They're laughing in those videos. Smoking, talking on their phones, talking to one another, all 4 of those people inside that residence, chillaxing. And Sayan's like, my friend, do me a favor, show me your hands. My friend, how did you get those injuries? And his first response is that of a monstrously guilty individual. What scratches? Y'all don't see these scratches. We don't see these scratches. So in order to find him not guilty, you would have to disbelieve your own eyes.
I'm sold based on that which is presented. Let's see what the defense attorney has to say.
Interpretation is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. As Mr. Kirby said in his opening, the evidence in this case is graphic and disturbing, and it is deeply sad. And I don't envy your position, Your Honor. The rest of the people in this courtroom get to be human. We can feel shock and outrage. But Your Honor, as the court, you are the embodiment of law. And as the court and the fact finder, the law requires that you not allow your verdict to be swayed by sympathy for anyone. It must be based on the evidence. There is an alternative theory in this case that makes sense of some of the discrepancies in the state's case. Jose was short, he was chubby, he was, according to the state, wearing slides the morning of February 22nd. I agree with the state that Laken Riley was physically fit, she was fast, she could have outrun him. But there's another suspect in this case who was taller, who was more physically fit, who was wearing sneakers on the day of the murder, and that is Diego Ibarra. Evidence that is subject.
I would want to know if they took Diego's DNA, because two brothers, very close DNA.
More than one interpretation is not proof beyond reasonable doubt. I would remind Your Honor that even if you think the alternative theories of the evidence are less likely, but they present any reasonable doubt, you would still be required to find Mr. Ibarra not guilty. We ask that Your Honor apply the exacting standard of the law to these facts and find Jose Ibarra not guilty.
And it didn't take Judge Haggard long to come to a decision.
I wouldn't expect so. They should have taken this to a jury with those facts. If they're trying to go with might have been somebody else, might have been the brother, you don't know, the DNA is close, that should have been taken to a jury. You only needed 1 out of 12 of those people to be able to hold out. And if you prepped that jury right, that could have been done. Not that I'm saying I want this guy to not be convicted. I think that this is one of the most horrendous things. I think that politically, when you're opening the border and allowing the influx of people that are there, this is the type of people that you're going to get. And the other countries are releasing prisoners and saying, go to the United States. Why? I don't want to feed you. They don't want to feed them. They don't want to have to pay to house them in their prisons. Just send them to the United States. Send them right across the border. That's what Joe Biden invited.
I'll tell you that you may have seen me, I make notes during the trial. I probably filled up 2 legal pads full of notes during the trial, but the closings, I want to just listen. And that's what I did. But I wrote down 2 things in the closing. One was a statement by Ms. Ross that the evidence was overwhelming and powerful. And then I also wrote down what Ms. Beck said, that I'm required to set aside my emotions. That's the same thing that we tell jurors in what and we give them their job. I would
Right.
That's the way I have to approach this, and I did. Both of those statements are correct. I'll now announce the verdict. In the state of Georgia versus Jose Antonio Ibarra, case SU 24-CR-0323, count 1, malice murder. I find the defendant guilty. Count 2, felony murder. I find the defendant guilty. Count 3, felony murder. I find the defendant guilty. Count 4, felony murder. I find the defendant guilty. Count 5, kidnapping with bodily injury. I find the defendant guilty. Count 6, aggravated assault with intent to rape. I find the defendant guilty. Count 7, aggravated battery. I find the defendant guilty. Count 8, obstructing or hindering a 911 call. I find the defendant guilty. Count 9, tampering with evidence. I find the defendant guilty. Count 10, Peeping Tom, I find the defendant guilty.
Yeah, I'm going to be straight up with you. Between the jacket he threw away that had Laken's blood on it and the surveillance footage showing him throwing it away, his selfies on the day of the murder where he's wearing the clothing in question, his DNA underneath her fingernails, his thumbprint on her phone, their cell phones being linked together at the time of the murder. This was, in my opinion, one of the strongest prosecution cases I have seen in quite some time. And I don't say that lightly.
That is
now, Laken's family and friends,
absolutely
they could be heard
true for me too.
Listen, the judge read the verdict.
That is as strong as it gets. That is beyond any reason that you have the ability to doubt. It's impossible to doubt that. But that's not the standard. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. Yeah, there's no reason that you would be able to doubt that. That his brother was there, any of that stuff. This is very solid. Really, no question.
Ibarra, who had the aid of an interpreter for the whole trial, he didn't really show any emotion. The court immediately moved to sentencing. Multiple people were offered the opportunity to speak about the impact that Laken had on their lives and what this death means to them and how it's impacted them. It's victim impact statements, basically how her death destroyed them. And that includes Laken's mother, Allison, and stepfather, John.
Your Honor, on February 22nd of 2024, our family and friends were given a life sentence without a chance of parole. Jose Ibarra took no pity on my scared, panicked, and struggling child. There is no end to the pain, suffering, and loss that we have experienced or will continue to endure. On that horrific day, my precious daughter was attacked, beaten, and shown no mercy. She fought for her life and dignity and to save herself from being brutally raped. This sick, twisted, and evil coward showed no regard for Laken or human life. We are asking that same be done to him.
I heard in the opening statements from the defense that the loss of a life that was apparently full of promise is tragic.
I'm going to tell you something I have a problem with right now. Look right here. Here and here. What do you not see? She's no longer interpreting this. Everything else during the trial was interpreted. That guy's guilty. Clearly guilty. He should be meant to listen to what these people are saying and listen to the translation of what they're saying. I would not have allowed him to not hear that translation. That bothers me.
I'm here today to let Your Honor and the entire world know that Laken's life was not apparently full of promise, but instead was abundantly and exceptionally full of promise, and was a shining beacon in the life of everyone that knew her, that ever came in contact with her. I'm so proud of Laken and the beautiful person she was.
And Laken's only sister, Lauren Phillips, also spoke, as did several of her roommates and friends. By the way, Lauren graduated high school in May, apparently enrolled in the University of Georgia, where, as we know, her sister was killed. There was even this heartbreaking body cam footage from officers when Laken's family arrives on scene. They find out that she died.
I don't want to tell you yes or no because I don't have names. I don't know who anybody is. I do know that this is a pretty serious incident.
That was tough. Capturing a family's worst moments in life like that just kind of gives you an idea of the impact of a crime like this. Ibarra appeared to have no emotion, no reaction to any of this, to what Laken's heartbroken family and friends were saying.
You saw that. He wasn't listening to what they were saying. Saw him just in the last picture there with the headphones on and the interpreter sitting right behind with the big cone thing on to block the sound from going anywhere else. Her death was completely avoidable with proper policies in this United States. She would still be here, and that's a tragedy. That's a really, really Sad tragedy. I'm very sorry to her family. This is the Lori Dana Show.